get my rubber gloves on. I am just so determined to keep my manicure absolutely tip-top fresh for as long as possible. Although we do have a small minor injury on my right hand, which of course is my doing hand. So I thought that if I put my rubber gloves on today, it would protect my hands a little bit. We'll have to see how this goes. So hello, good morning and welcome. What is the weather like for you? So here we are on Tuesday the 28th of February. It's the 1st of March tomorrow. So is that the beginning of spring? Well, I have to change the title of this set of videos, Flower Arranging from the Garden in the Springtime, or am I going to wait a little bit longer? I think the official first day of spring is actually the 21st of March. I'm not sure about that. Good morning, Joan. It's lovely to see you here. And if you're watching live, please do leave me the hashtag live. And if you're watching on catch up, leave me the hashtag catch up and I will catch up with you in the comments. So for today's project, I've been having a look at my Valentine's Day wreath, which I've had hanging on my front door. So Valentine's Day is well and truly over. So I've taken that off my front door, and to be honest, I'm not quite sure what to do with this wreath. It's still got plenty of life left in it if you like things that are dried. So it's a slightly crispy wreath made out of the aromatic bay leaves, and I tied a ribbon on the top in order that I could tie it, hang it from the hook on my front door. So I think I'm probably going to save that little bit of ribbon for hanging up my next door wreath. And good morning, Linda, as well. So I may well put that on the shed door or something like that, or perhaps we should play Hunt the Heart-Shaped Door Wreath, and I'll change it every morning and put it somewhere different. So that has sort of done its bit, really. So I am thinking now of something a little bit more spring-like. There's still nothing really growing in my garden, but I have been, and I'm pretending that I've picked these from my garden, and it is something that you may well have in your garden, and this is Viburnum tinus. And if you are super keen on flower arranging and you're looking for things to grow in your garden, I would say that I would definitely have Viburnum tinus in the garden. And then you'll say to me, well, why haven't you got it in your garden? Well, I did have it in the garden when we moved into the house. I don't know how long ago that was now, 25 years ago. And I'm just reading Joan's comment at the same time there. We did plant Viburnum tinus and I cropped it really heavily, and I think probably shrubs and so on have a limited life, but I think when they're constantly being cropped for flower arrangements, I think probably their life was a little bit shortened. So it's a really good shrub to have evergreen, and then during the winter months, I prefer it when it's not in flower. It has these tiny little pink buds, which are just absolutely beautiful. And they're the kind of thing that look great in Christmas flower arrangements. Don't do so well on Christmas door wreaths because they haven't got a water source and you'll find the greenery holds up, but the buds will flop a little bit. And at this time of year, the flowers come out. They're normally a white or a pinky white. And to be honest, these are probably going over a little bit, but I'm going to make myself a wreath, for my front door, and it'll look lovely on the front door. My front door is north facing, so it's the cool side of the house, and it's protected by a porch over the top. So jumping back to your comments, Joan, you're telling me that you've just bought the DV of Julie and Julia, so the cooking one with Julia Childs and Julie, I can't remember her surname, but the blogger in New York, that's the video you've got. You have to let me know how you get on with it. And did you watch it at the time? Because I think it must have come out, gosh, I can't remember. It must have been out 20 years. I'm not entirely sure. I thought I had watched it, and then when I came to watch it over in the New Year period, nothing was familiar at all apart from the last scene. And I think probably it's because even though you don't watch films, you're seeing clips of them, aren't you? At cinema, clips on the TV, probably even watching shows where films are being reviewed as well. So I'd love to know how you get on. So I've got a whole bucket full of Viburnum tinus, which is shattering a little bit, which is another good reason to be working outdoors. And I'm just going to reach down because these ones have got a slightly pinkier blossoms to them. And now my next challenge is, well, you'll really enjoy it, Joan. It's a beautiful film, and I'm not really one for rewatching films, but I think that is a film that I would rewatch. And also, have you seen Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris? That's a beautiful film as well. It's starring, I think it's Leslie Manville, the British actress. You'll recognise her from loads of quality TV dramas, but that's worth watching as well. So I've got a hoop to make my door wreath on. Can you see that? And if you're a regular watcher of mine or a member of my Facebook group, you'll know that when I spot a hubcap that's fallen off a car, you know normally what happens is the hubcap falls off in the road and then someone props it up on the side and nobody ever goes back to claim it. So after it's been there for a certain amount of time, I will go along and pick up the metal bit, and I quite often I'll bring the plastic bit home and put it in the bin. So the hubcaps we've got are the plastic top, and then they are fitted on with this piece of wire. So it's a bit like if you're putting a fabric cover over your homemade jam. You'd make your jam, you'd have the lid on it, and then you would get the hubcap, your piece of lovely floral gingham fabric, and then this would be the elastic band which would hold the fabric in place. So I do tend to pick those up. So it's a great size for a door wreath, but probably a good job I'm wearing gloves is they are, because they've been on the car, they have this sort of rusty, dusty, I guess is it when you come and break the sort of dust from that, so that they're quite dirty. I guess I could have washed it and scrubbed it, but you know, life's too short to wash and scrub the bit of a hubcap. And then to do my attachment of preference is always the mossing wire that you use at Christmas time, because I like the way that it just holds steady as you go. And I thought, actually, if I'm wanting to put this on the door, on the compost heap when it's finished, what I want to be able to do is just cut all the way through the string and just be able to put the string and the greenery straight on the compost heap. If you use the wire and you want to, you see, I would never throw a door wreath away. I would always defoliate it because I want to keep the base. You know, it may be that, yes, I know I've found this for nothing, but normally with wreath bases, you've paid some money for that metal base or a straw base, or perhaps you've got a woven willow base, and you don't want to get rid of it all. And that's the only disadvantage with using the wire, is that you've got to, when you cut through it, you've either laboriously got to unwire it all, and again, who wants to do that? Or you've got to cut through it all and then make a pile of offcuts of little bits of wire and then a pile of your greenery so you can separate it out. So that's why I'm going for string today. And then I thought, well, what's the point of starting, a brand new bit of string that's not actually brand new, because I'm always saving these leftover bits. So I have got some wire. I've got paper cover wire that I have reeled back, and then because I get my delivery of Freddie's flowers, they always come in a box, and the flowers are cushioned at the end with scrunched up tissue paper, and then they're wrapped in brown paper, and then they are strapped into the box. There's a couple of holes on the inside of the box with a nice quality bit of brown garden twine. So I always save that as well. So quite often I'll have that in a bag, and if I'm doing a hand tied, I will just reach for this piece of wire. So I've just got a few leftover bits of tying materials, so I thought I would start to put those to a little bit of good use. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take my secateurs, or it may be that your floristry scissors are strong enough, and start to cut my greenery to length. So the greenery is it sort of arrives when you'll notice as it grows, it sort of has these sort of sprig shaped bits. So I'm going to aim for cut. Everything I cut is about this long, between stretched out finger to thumb, and I will go through and work my way down the greenery and then discard these bits at the end. So there's a little bit of cutting to go first of all, so I'm going to try and be organised and aim for them all in there. So I try and just work on one piece at a time so it doesn't get too cluttered. And then I can always, if the pieces are too long or too short, well, hopefully they're not too short, but if they're too long, I can always be cutting those down later on. And normally this is all quite therapeutic out in the garden, and I'm not quite sure whether you can, I left that stubby bit, whether you can hear it, but there's obviously roadworks going on outside, and I'm being accompanied not only by the sparrows up in the pergola above me, but a line of some sort of industrial machinery. So all is not quiet today. The birds are trying to out-sing the equipment. I'm not quite sure what's going on actually. We do seem to have loads of roadworks in town at the moment. We seem to have lots of water leaks that are being repaired. I guess that we're coming up to the end of a financial year and leftover monies are being spent. So I am trying not to just cut off the flower heads. I will probably need to use some of the bare bits of green, just the ordinary greenery, and intermingle them in. Sometimes when you've got a really beautiful foliage like this, you think, I do all flowers, and then you're getting to the end and you're running out, and then you've got a lovely dory that is flower, flower, flower all the way round, and then the last little bit you're thinking, oh gosh, greenery, greenery, greenery. So I'm trying where I can. Actually, this is very greenery heavy. I just missed that comment, Joan. You were saying about spring dories and making them on moss. Yes, of course you can make them on moss. So the idea is with your dories that you should make them, the common convention is you make them on a water retaining material in order that your flowers, to keep our flowers and foliage alive, we know that they need a water source. And that is traditionally why you would have a mossed wreath, because that would be the source of moisture, which would keep your flowers looking fresher for longer. Now, I very rarely make a mossed wreath these days, because when I put my wreath on my front door, I don't need it to last forever. And in fact, my Christmas door wreath easily lasts 6 or 8 weeks without a water source, because I am using robust winter greenery that I put in water first of all, so it's really well conditioned. But yes, with spring flowers, it would look lovely with moss, and particularly if you have a decorative moss. I'm not quite sure how easy this is going to be to tie a knot with my rubber gloves on. With a decorative moss, you don't have to cover the whole of the wreath, so that's quite fashionable at the moment, is to have like a spray with all your flowers concentrated on one side, and to leave the rest of the wreath bare. So in the context of a mossed wreath, that would mean just leaving the wreath, the moss, exposed. So I'm going to tie I think I can see here, with my long finger bending over, I may well have to take my rubber gloves off. Oh no, oh no. I just want this manicure to last, and I know when you're working with your hands, it's you're getting you risk knocking your fingers and chipping off your nail polish, and then of course I'll have to give my hands a real thorough wash when I get in, so it's all a bit too much action with the hands. So hopefully that's answered your question, Joan. I know that normally the questions flash up again when someone else asks the question, so you'll have to ask me another question, and then I'll be able to see your comments flash up. So with your materials, you could laboriously tie these on one at a time. That would take you quite a while. So what I like to do is get a nice bushy sprig. I've got 2 pieces here. They look nice and bushy just because of the nature of the plant material. and then I'm going to bind them on. So this is the tricky bit, not that it's tricky as such, but every time I lie the wreath down, the string is going to loosen a little bit. So I'm going to make sure I'm pulling it as tight as I can. And then when I lay it down, I'm just, conscious. I don't want the spring sort of bouncing back. And then I pick it up again and everything goes a little bit looser. So here, I'm just going randomly through my selection. I've picked up a bit of foliage only, and then with a flower like that, sort of making a mini corsage. And then when I add that on, I'm working around in the same direction. So I've got a little bit of unsightliness where the string is on the wreath. So I cover that up with my next piece like this, and then it'll appear invisible. So actually what I've got now, I've got my hands over the good stuff, trying to hold my stems in place whilst not crushing the lovely decorative stems. And I've gone over there 4 times, working my way down the length of the stem. And that is how you do it. So you could be, I think this bit here I'm going to put on its own because it's quite chunky. And even if what's going to happen, my flowers are just going to droop a little bit. And actually, it may be with the opening and closing of my front door that the petals are going to shatter. They've shattered a little bit as I've pulled my flowers out of the bucket. So, it's not going to last forever, but it's a way of making use of my excess greenery. So, yes, it's not picked from my garden. My friend was in desperate need of trimming back her viburnum because it was overhanging her drive. And she said, would I like to come round and cut some? I think actually I'm fulfilling the role as an informal gardener. She gives me the greenery and she ends up with her shrubbery in her garden trimmed a little bit. So I'm making just a skinny wreath here because I haven't got that wide bulk. Normally when you're mossing a wreath, you've got the base of the wreath is sort of this wide because you've got 2 rings of wire held together, held apart by the struts that go round it. So not doing too badly, and you can see all my little overwrappings here. So I'm overwrapping more than I would do normally if I was using my wire. Now, it's going to be difficult to knot off my string. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not sure I can do that with my gloves. I'm going to take my 2 bits of string and tie them in a knot. I don't know whether I'm hampering myself with those rubber gloves. And then what I do when you've actually got quite a bit of string is don't let too much of it off. So keep it quite short and then it stays more manageable. So again, what's that distance? It's between finger and thumb, and that is what is letting me sort of keep control. So another little bushy bit. I don't want to go too many flowers. The way that it's working out, I do seem to have a bit of green, a bit of flower, a bit of green, a bit of flower. So I want to make sure I keep that look going. It's just the way it's worked out. So it's not sort of particularly flower heavy. So go in with a bit of green here and then a little bit of flower at the bottom. That's 3 pieces there. So the more you get into the rhythm, the more confident you become, the more pieces you can hold together, but you don't want to end up with a wreath that was skinny to start with and then it's got fatter, chunkier as you've worked your way through. So you do want to keep off at a consistent level. So probably the time here I'm sort of a quarter of the way round. If I'd suddenly decided that looking at my table I could go chunkier, I would probably take that off and start again and go chunkier. But I just wanted to have quite a slimline looking wreath here. So I think probably from those few stems I cut, I've probably got enough. I won't have to delve down into my bucket. So I'm just making sure a little bit of green and a little bit of flower. So down and round. Just keeping that string under control. And the other thing about the wire, the mossing wire, it comes on a spool, and if you drop it, it doesn't sort of unravel too far. But with this being string and a ball, as soon as I drop it, it unravels, and then I'm having to corral it all again and make sure it doesn't unwind too much. Let's go around. So what's the weather like where you are? We had the tiniest bit of sleet, and Linda will know because she doesn't live too far from me, and Joan, I don't know what the weather is like with you, whether you get more snow than we do, but we hardly ever get any snow in this corner of England. Although I was looking at my Facebook memories, and was it 5 years ago, the Beast from the East? So we had proper snow that year. So it was 5 years since my bay tree got decimated by the cold weather. But we had a tiniest bit of snow before Christmas, and there's sort of 30 seconds of sleet. And I think everybody, certainly in my neck of the woods, because it's so surprising we get snow, it's like everyone stops and looks, and it was literally 5 seconds of snow, and then it was all gone. It must be so lovely if you live in a country where you get, proper snowfall. Perhaps you get fed up with it, but I do think if you live in a country with proper snowfall, you're better equipped, aren't you, with snow change and all that kind of stuff. So we don't have any of that. Although my friends up in Scotland, they do have their winter tyres that they put on. But I looked up at the wrong time then. I just saw 2 comments just fading away in the distance. When the video goes live, I'll be able to see what the comments were. And in fact, if you're watching this on record, on the replay, you can actually look at the comments. Oh, Linda, yes. Beast from the East, Linda, yes. And Joan's saying it's looking good. So it's just a nice way, isn't it, Joan? I like to think of this as me sort of intercepting anything that is heading out to the compost heap. And I think that's my favourite kind of flower arranging. Now, because this is, a dark, rusty, crusty wreath frame, it doesn't look like those bright copper frames, that you traditionally use for your door wreath. And that would look quite unfinished, wouldn't it, if I only went part way through. But actually, I quite like that, where it's this skinny frame off to the one side. And that's what I'm saying at the moment is quite fashionable, is this incomplete door wreath. So if you decide that you wanted to make yourself a door wreath, but you didn't have enough material to go all the way around, you just have to own that and be super confident. Just say, well, that was the way that I wanted to have it designed. The only issue you've got, though, is that because the actual weight is on that side, and if you want to hang it on your door like that, you may well find that gravity will want to do its own thing, and it wants to spin round a little bit. And I think that looks quite nice there, but it sort of looks a bit like a shopping bag there. You just have to have a look. Right then, let's get going. So a few more stems here. Again, I don't want to make them too big all of a sudden, because otherwise it's going to look chunky in the middle. So pulling it nice and tight. Oops. I would say, Joan, it's trickier with the string because it does roll away. And you're having to be more intentional. But you don't get a knocky sound. When you have it on the metal, the mossing wire on the reel, and all the time it's going clonk onto the table, clonk. And if you're doing quite a few wreaths, sometimes I put a towel on the bottom just so that clonking sound is deadened a little bit. So I would say, stick with the method that you like. Part of me is just thinking, I wanted to show you something different, but also I've got these odd little bits of string that I keep keeping. And what's the point of keeping them if you're not actually going to use them? So I wanted to use up my scraps. Oops. Oh, that's not so good, is it? The string snapped. So I'll just tie that together. Much easier not wearing gloves. I think probably I was hampering myself with the marigolds because the fingers were a bit too long. I would have been better wearing a tighter fitting pair of gardening gloves or the gloves that I normally wear. You're saying I must have lots of patience. Well, I think the thing that you're doing here is that you're doing it for the pleasure. So probably, if I was making these commercially, it becomes a little bit of a chore. If you've got to make 5 of these to sell, and then perhaps they don't sell and all the rest of it. So I'm just sitting here having a mindful moment on a Tuesday morning, being outdoors, listening to those sounds of nature. And so it's enjoyable. And of course, I'm sitting here chatting with you. So what better way, if you had some girlfriends round, in fact, I've started doing this with some of my friends, and we're having these little craft evenings. So, we just sit. It's just an excuse to get together, have a cup of tea, catch up with each other's lives. But we come away and we've kept our fingers busy, haven't been in the biscuit too much. And it's nice to come away that you've been with friends, but you come away with something. And then next time, I'm looking at my door wreath. When I come in, I'll be thinking, oh yes, I made that. I was chatting to Joan and Linda at the time. And it just sort of makes you think of, I'll be thinking of you next time I come to my front door, wondering whether you've made yourselves one. Looking forward to seeing the photographs that you'll be posting in the Facebook group. Yes, the trick with the string, Joan, is to all the time, as I say, keeping it on a tight rein so it doesn't run out of control. But it's not been too bad so far. But yes, my preference would be, my preferred tying method would be the mossing wire. But even the mossing wire can be difficult because if you pull it too tight and if you pull it against your fingers, you end up cutting the side of your fingers, sort of like a paper cut but with wire. So it's about getting used to your materials and working out how best, I must remember to keep winding the same way, otherwise it will fall off, how best to use them and adapt the technique that suits you. And that's what's so good, if you're going to real life classes or you're watching other people on YouTube, everybody does things in a slightly different way. So it's a great source of inspiration. And just even sometimes myself, I see videos and I don't know if you're watching Sharon, but I watch Sharon's videos and I think, oh, how does Sharon do that? And I think, oh yes, I've never thought of doing it that way. So it's quite nice to be able to have a little insight into the way that other people do things. So how's that looking? I can see here, oops, if I hold that tight, quite a lot of flour, and it's a bit skimpy on this side, so I'm going to try and see if I can introduce a little bit more of the foliage, or perhaps where some of the blossom has gone over a bit, but I'm sort of left with where the berries are starting to develop. Because if you do leave your viburnum sort of to do its natural cycle on the bush, you will end up with little bluey black iridescent berries, which are really pretty. But because I'm always was always cutting mine when we had it, I never got the berries. But they are really quite beautiful. So I'm coming back to the beginning now, and this is it's not the tricky bit, but when you think you've finished your door wreath, I will say that there's almost space for a bit more greenery. And a few more handfuls. So there it looks like I've got one more handful to go, but experience tells me I've possibly got 2 or even 3 more handfuls to go. So what I need to do when I get back to the beginning is lift these bits up. So I've actually got sort of 10 centimetres more of winding to do, not the 5 centimetres in the gap. And that way you get that seamless join. So when I hang it on the door, I should be able to hang it at any point. You won't be able to see where the beginning and end is. But if you have difficulty doing this, the thing to do is, so for instance, if you have difficulty with the join, is if you decide to put a bow on it, if this is quite rustic, I could have some raffia or something like that, and just to sort of cover up that patch there. And you're saying that I think Jen, you were saying, how do you get it so even? And these comments don't stay around very much. Mine is even because I started off on that skinny frame, and I was just all the time having the 2 or 3 pieces of greenery. So I was trying to keep my greenery the same size. So if you have difficulty doing that, what you could do is when you've cut all your greenery up, your foliage and your flowers and your blossoms, is you could always tie them into little bundles, and using, or you could tie them with a knot with a piece of string, as if they were, mini buttonholes or something like that. And then you could lay them all out on your table, and you could say to yourself, well, are they all the same size? And if you've got one that's huge and one that's skinny, you'd know you need to even them up a little bit. So that might be a way of doing it, is to make yourself bundles first of all, and then tie the bundles onto your wreath form. And that might make it easy if you are using string, because you could just do a few winds round and tie a knot, and then you'll know it's going to hold together. So that might be one way of doing it, to try and keep it all even. So I'm going to try and finish off this last bit. Now, lo and behold, I haven't quite got enough greenery. So I've got tons, but I just haven't cut enough. So as I'm looking round, I'm going to just make sure, because as I pulled the greenery out of the bucket, some of it went a bit topsy-turvy, making sure that my cut ends are actually back inside the bucket. Otherwise, I'll come to use this, and then I'll wonder why the foliage has started to droop. So another little bit of green. So let's get cutting. 1, 2, I reckon 3, 4. Well, I'm going to cut all of that. 6 pieces I got there. So here we go. So a little bundle. I'm going to do a bundle of 2, and that will slide on there. So this is when it gets tricky, because I'm having to slide it on there and lift up a little bit. Oops. And they've all slipped sideways. They're always much easier to do when you're just doing it without showing someone else how to do it, but shouldn't be a problem. So that's one bundle in, but I've still... Yeah, you could do it with a single gold ring, Joan, but I would say, because originally when I was thinking about this project last night, I thought I've got the a white covered hoop, but they do the gold ones. It's not because they're gold, but they have that shiny surface. And if you're using your string, you just need to be sure that as you're tying your materials on, they're not sliding around. And this is the what I quite like about this hubcap ring. Number 1, it was free, and number 2, because of that sort of rusty texture to it, it's can you see where the beginning and end is? The rusty texture meant that my string was gripping on. So can you tell that's the middle? I think perhaps is there just one bit of greenery missing there. So I might come back in with another bit of green. I'm just going to pull off some of those lower leaves, and then I might just cut myself a piece of string off, nice and generous, and then find my string, which is going over that way, put those there, and then winding round, because I don't want to crush the greenery, the foliage that I've got. So I'm sort of going in and out and round and round. So this last little bit needs to be slightly more delicately done. You're sort of finessing it off here, not wanting to crush it. So getting that nice, yes, I think that looks better. Like that. And then as I get around to the back, I'm going to pull a bit of string here with my finger and then loop the string around so to lock it in place. And then what I normally do is find a little bit of a sticky out twig to tie a knot around and just make that really, really firm. So tie, 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 trim off the excess. So there we have the finished wreath. What you could do, Joan, is have a go with your gloss finished, shiny, smooth wreath and just see how you get on. If you're having trouble with that, it may be that a little bit of moss. I find it by the side of the road, Joan. You know me, always got a pair of scissors in my bag so I can do a little bit of foraging, but I pick them up on the side of the road when I see them. I don't pick them up straight away because I think, well, the car owner might come back if they could remember where the hubcap sprung off, but I don't think you ever know. So you quite often spot them. People pick them out of the road and they sort of prop them up on the side of the pavement, and if they've been there a few weeks, I pick them up and take them home, and then I put the plastic bit in the bin and then I save the bit of metal. So I was going to say the other thing you could do just to help yourself is to cover your gold shiny wreath ring with the paper stem text with the buttonhole tape, but that gives a bit of a grip. So it's quite laborious though doing that, but it's like all these things, it's trial and error. You know the basic process of how to make a wreath, and it's trial and error in terms of finessing your technique a little bit. So it's always easier when you've got a bit of a rough texture, because it just means everything grips on a little bit better. It'll just mean it's slightly more challenging with a very high shine wreath, because you may find you put a bit of you put your first 2 or 3 bits on and then they're sort of smooth, you could almost move them round the door wreath. So make sure your bindings are really, really tight and everything is really, really concentrated together. So perhaps, I don't know how many, imagine I'd made these into bundles and perhaps I had 20 bundles going around. Perhaps if I had a particularly shiny wreath and things are moving, I might up it and put 25 bundles in, and then everything would be really robust and really, really compact. So I think you'll agree, even though that Viburnum isn't tip top in terms of being in prime condition, I would rather have my friend had asked me to cut it a few weeks ago when I still had some buds on there rather than the full bloom. You still get that, that overall pleasing look, and that'll look lovely on my front door. And then what I do with that bit of ring, the bit of the ribbon that I saved from last time, the hook on my door, but everyone's got a hook in a different place. I actually have a little screw hook that goes into my front door, and it has to go in a certain place because we've got some glazing in our door, and that certain place really, to my eye, is a little bit too high, but I can't screw a screw into a piece of glass. So I get a loop of ribbon and I've tied a knot in it to make a loop, and again I will put that underneath the wreath, wiggle it round so I don't crush too much. And at this point I don't even think this is where I started the wreath, because it looks the same all the way around. I don't particularly have to make sure that that is covering up any gaps, because I don't think you can particularly tell which is the top and which is the bottom. And there you have it. That will now hang down the appropriate amount that I think is going to be pleasing for my front door. You can't really see it, can you? But I will take some photographs on a plain background and I'll post them on the community tab pages. And if you're on Facebook, don't forget to come and join my Facebook group. It's Florist.world, but again, there'll be a link to that in the show notes underneath the video. So as Jane says, I hope you all have a great day. And for those of you who signed up to my Zoom flower classes, these are the ones where I'm teaching you how to teach your own flower classes. The class starts at 12 o'clock today, so hopefully you have got the link for that already. So I'll catch up with those of you who are signed up for that at 12 o'clock. And then if you're on my Facebook group, I will be on live in my group at 12 o'clock on Friday. So I shall say goodbye. Hope you have a great week, and I'll catch up with you same time, same place next week.